The rain came down hard that night. Not the kind that taps on your window, but the kind that pounds the streets like it's trying to wash the whole city clean. Puddles swallowed sidewalks. Streetlights flickered under the weight of the storm. And in a second-floor apartment above a closed-down laundromat, she stood frozen in the hallway, heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. She'd waited until he passed out. Again. Slumped on the couch, empty bottle dangling from his fingers, mouth open, snoring loud enough to drown out the thunder. She moved like a ghost, bare feet on cold linoleum, breath held, every muscle tight. She didn't dare turn on a light. Didn't dare breathe too loud. She'd learned that the hard way. Her hands shook as she zipped up the old duffel bag she'd hidden under the bed weeks ago. Inside, a change of clothes, her birth certificate, the little cash she'd been stashing in a coffee can, and the bus ticket she'd bought online using a library computer. She hadn't planned to leave tonight. Not really. But then he'd come home angry, angrier than usual, and the look in his eyes told her this time might be the last. She didn't cry. Not yet. Tears came later when you were safe. Right now, survival was all that mattered. She slipped out the back door, the one that led down a narrow metal staircase slick with rain. The cold hit her like a slap. She hadn't even grabbed a jacket. But turning back wasn't an option. So she ran, down the alley, past overflowing dumpsters and broken glass, her thin sneakers slipping on wet concrete. Every shadow felt like him. Every car that slowed made her duck behind a fence. She didn't know where she was going, just away, far away. But the city at night wasn't kind to someone alone, especially not someone with nowhere to go. Her phone had died hours ago. No calls, no texts, no lifeline. She'd thought about going to the police station, but last time she'd shown up with a black eye, they'd just sighed and said, "Did you get a restraining order?" She had. He'd laughed when she showed it to him. Tore it up right in front of her. Now, soaked and shivering, she found herself near the edge of downtown where the streetlights were fewer and the buildings looked tired. A 24-hour convenience store glowed like a beacon in the dark. She ducked inside just for a minute, just to catch her breath and maybe buy a cheap charger. But the clerk barely looked up from his phone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. And through the rain-streaked window she saw it. A black SUV parked at the far end of the lot. Engine running. Tinted windows. It looked expensive. Safe even, she didn't think. She just moved. Outside again, the wind whipped her hair across her face. Rain stung her eyes. She walked fast, then faster, until she was standing beside the driver's window. Her hands were numb. Her teeth chattered. She raised a trembling hand and tapped lightly on the glass. It took a few seconds. Then the window rolled down just enough, 6 inches, maybe less. Warm air spilled out, carrying the faint scent of leather and something sharp like citrus cleaner. Inside, a man sat perfectly still. Late 40s, maybe. Clean-shaven, dark suit even at this hour. His eyes, gray, unreadable, locked onto hers without blinking. She swallowed hard. Her voice came out thin, almost lost in the rain. Can I hide in your car?" She expected him to say no, to tell her to get lost, maybe even call the cops, but he didn't. He studied her. The wet hair stuck to her cheek, the bruise just starting to bloom under her left eye, the way her shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear into herself. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask what happened, just gave a single, slow nod. Relief crashed over her so hard she nearly stumbled. She yanked open the back door and slid inside, pulling the duffel bag after her. The seat was warm, dry, quiet. She sank into it like she'd been underwater for days and finally broke the surface. The man didn't speak, didn't turn around. He just put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, smooth and steady, as if this happened every night. She watched the city blur past the window, wet streets, blinking signs, strangers under umbrellas who had no idea what she'd just escaped. She wanted to thank him, but her throat felt too tight. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to shake. Minutes passed. The rain softened to a drizzle. The man drove without a destination, it seemed, just circling quiet neighborhoods, avoiding main roads. She noticed the way his hands rested lightly on the wheel, calm, controlled. No white knuckles. No angry grip. That small detail eased something in her chest. Finally, he spoke. One word, low and even. Safe. She wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement, but she nodded anyway. For now. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Just a flick of his eyes. She caught his gaze for a split second. Steady, serious, but not cruel. Not like his eyes. Where to? He asked. She didn't know. She couldn't go to a shelter. Derek knew all the usual ones. Couldn't stay with friends. He'd already shown up at 2 of their places. And she sure as hell wasn't going back. Anywhere, she whispered. Just not here. He didn't press. Didn't act like she was a burden. He just turned onto a wider road heading east, away from the heart of the city. She leaned her head against the cool window, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something she almost didn't recognize. Hope. But she had no idea who this man really was. To her, he was just a stranger who said yes when she asked for help. A quiet man in a black SUV who didn't ask questions. Someone who gave her a few dry minutes in a storm. What she didn't know, couldn't have guessed, was that the man driving her away from danger was himself the center of a different kind of storm. One built on silence, power, and consequences far darker than she could imagine. His name wasn't on any business card. He didn't have a public face. But in certain circles, underground clubs, backroom deals, late-night docks, he was known simply as the man who decides. People crossed him once. Never twice. He ran a network that moved everything from stolen cars to encrypted data. He had men who disappeared problems and people without a trace. Cops avoided his territory. Rivals respected his word or paid for it. And yet here he was driving a soaked, terrified woman through the rain because she'd asked. Why? Even he wasn't sure. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Not with fear of him, but fear of what was behind her. Maybe it was the bruise. Or maybe it was something deeper. Something buried under years of hardened choices. Years ago, he'd had a sister, younger, bright-eyed. She'd stayed too long with a man who broke her, piece by piece until there was nothing left to save. He'd been too late then. Too busy building his empire to notice the quiet cries for help. He wouldn't be too late again. The car turned onto a quieter street, lined with old brick buildings and chain-link fences. He pulled into the driveway of a warehouse that looked abandoned, windows boarded, paint peeling. But as they got closer, she saw the security cameras, the fresh tire tracks in the gravel, the heavy steel door that slid open automatically as they approached. He parked inside a dimly lit garage bay. The door rolled shut behind them with a low hum. "Stay here a minute," he said, turning off the engine. She nodded, too tired to argue, too wary to move. He got out, walked around, and opened her door. "Come on." She followed him through a side door into a surprisingly clean interior. Concrete floors, high ceilings, but warm. A space heater hummed in the corner. There was a small kitchenette, a couch with a folded blanket, and a door that probably led to a bathroom. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said, nodding. "Towels under the sink. Hot water works." She almost cried at the thought of hot water, of privacy, of not having to listen for footsteps. "Thank you," she managed, voice cracking. He gave a short nod. "Get dry, rest, no one's coming here." She believed him. Not because she knew him, but because of the way he said it, like it was fact, not promise. As she walked toward the bathroom, she glanced back once. He was already pulling a phone from his pocket, speaking in a low, firm tone in a language she didn't understand. But his posture, straight, alert, told her he was handling something serious. She closed the bathroom door, locked it, more out of habit than necessity, and let the hot water run until steam filled the room. She peeled off her wet clothes, wincing at the fresh scrape on her elbow, the old bruises on her ribs. But under the water, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. Outside, the man made 2 quick calls. One to cancel a meeting, another to a trusted associate. Clear the perimeter. No visitors, not even family. Then he sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the closed bathroom door, listening to the sound of running water like it was the most important thing in the world. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story beyond what her eyes had told him. But he knew this: she was running from a monster. And sometimes the only thing that matters is giving someone a place to stop running, even if just for one night. Hours later, wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt and dry socks, she emerged. He was still there, now sitting at a small table, sipping black coffee from a plain mug. "Hungry?" he asked. She nodded. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. He stood, opened a cabinet and pulled out canned soup. A pot, a spoon, simple, no fuss. As he heated the soup, she sat at the table, watching him move with quiet efficiency, no wasted motion, no unnecessary words. When he placed the bowl in front of her, he paused, looked out the high window at the fading storm. Because someone should have helped her, he said almost to himself. She didn't ask who her was. She just nodded, understanding in a way that didn't need words. And in that moment, in a hidden room inside a forgotten warehouse, two strangers, one running from violence, the other who commanded it, shared a quiet meal bound not by fate but by the simple human act of saying yes when someone asked for help. Outside, the rain finally stopped, but neither of them knew what morning would bring. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of light that sneaks in through high windows without making a sound. She woke on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket that smelled faintly of soap and cedar. For a few blurry seconds, she forgot where she was. Then it all rushed back. The rain, the running, the black SUV, the quiet man who hadn't asked for anything in return. Her body ached, but it was a clean kind of ache, the kind that comes after you've finally stopped holding your breath. She sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her ribs, and looked around. The space was sparse but cared for. A kettle on the stove, a stack of clean towels on a shelf, a single framed photo on the wall, black and white, showing a younger version of him standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a wide smile. His sister, maybe? She didn't ask. He wasn't in the main room. But the door to a side office was slightly open, and she could hear low voices. His, calm and measured, and another man's, tense but respectful. She stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of instinct. She'd learned long ago that silence kept you safe. After a few minutes, the other voice faded. Footsteps. Then he appeared in the doorway, holding two mugs. Steam curled from both. Coffee? He asked, holding one out. She nodded, taking it carefully. The warmth seeped into her fingers. Thank you. He sat across from her at the small table, sipping his own. No rush, no pressure. Just two people sharing a quiet morning in a place that felt impossibly like a temporary island in a stormy sea. You can stay, he said after a while. As long as you need. She looked up, surprised. Why? He didn't smile, but something in his expression softened. Because you shouldn't have to run forever. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just drank her coffee and watched the light shift across the concrete floor. Days passed like that, slow, steady, almost peaceful. He never asked for her name, and she didn't offer it. They existed in a kind of unspoken agreement. She wouldn't pry into his world, and he wouldn't push her to explain hers. But little by little, trust grew, not in words, but in actions. He brought groceries, simple things, bread, eggs, fruit, soup. Left them on the counter without comment. She started cooking. Not much at first, just scrambled eggs or toast, but then she made a pot of rice and beans one evening, the way her grandmother used to. He ate it without saying anything, but the next day he came back with plantains and fresh cilantro. She noticed things about him. How he always wiped his boots before coming inside, how he kept his phone face down unless it rang, how he never raised his voice even when the men who visited looked nervous or angry. There was a stillness to him like a deep lake, calm on the surface, but you knew there was weight underneath. One afternoon, while washing dishes, she saw him standing by the window, staring out at the empty lot behind the warehouse. His shoulders were tight. She didn't say anything, just handed him a towel when he turned around. Thanks, he said, drying his hands. You okay? She asked, surprising herself. He paused. Just thinking. About? He looked at her for a long moment like he was deciding whether to answer. About how easy it is for people to disappear, and how hard it is for anyone to notice. She knew what he meant. She'd felt invisible for years, like her pain was background noise in someone else's life. The police, her neighbors, even her own family. They'd all looked away, hoping it would fix itself. I noticed you, she said quietly. He gave a small nod. And I noticed you. That was enough. As the days turned into a week, she started helping around the place. Folded laundry, swept the floor, watered the single potted plant on the windowsill, a tough little succulent that somehow thrived in the dry air. It felt good to do something useful, to feel like she wasn't just taking but giving back even in small ways. He never treated her like a guest, or a burden, just someone who belonged there for now. But outside their quiet bubble, the world kept turning. One evening, 2 men in dark jackets showed up. They didn't knock, just stood by the garage door until he came out. She watched from the window, heart pounding, but they only spoke for a few minutes before leaving. When he came back inside, his jaw was set. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," he said. But his eyes said otherwise. Later, she overheard one of the men on the phone, voice low. "Boss is keeping her here?" "What's going on? Since when does he play babysitter?" She pretended not to hear, but the word stuck with her. Keeping her, like she was a secret. Or a problem. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Was she putting him in danger? Was this safe house even safe anymore? She thought about leaving, packing her bag and slipping out before dawn. But where would she go? Back to the streets? To another stranger's car? The next morning, she found him in the kitchen making tea. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said, standing in the doorway. He turned, eyebrows raised. "You're not. But your people, they're talking." He set the kettle down. "Let them talk. They think I'm a risk. They don't know you." She crossed her arms. "Do you?" He looked at her, really looked. "I know you ran in the rain with nothing but a duffel bag and a bruise on your face. I know you cook like someone who learned to feed others before feeding yourself. I know you listen more than you speak. And I know you haven't slept through the night once since you got here." She blinked, surprised he'd noticed all that. "That's enough for me," he added. She swallowed hard. "My ex, he won't stop looking. He's got this obsession. Like I belong to him." "He doesn't get to decide that," the man said, voice low but firm. "No one does." She nodded, but the worry didn't leave her chest. A few days later, she saw something that changed everything. She was sorting laundry when she heard raised voices outside. Not shouting, just tense, clipped words. She peeked through a crack in the garage door and saw him standing with one of his men. A younger guy with a scar above his eyebrow, just saying, "If she's got heat on her, it could blow back on us," the man was saying. Cops start poking around and suddenly we're explaining why she's here. "She's here because I said so," came the quiet reply. "And if you've got a problem with that, you can walk." The younger man hesitated, then lowered his head. "No problem, boss." When the man came back inside, he found her standing by the sink, hands gripping the edge. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "I'm nobody." "You're not nobody." She looked down. "I feel like I'm dragging you into something messy." He stepped closer, not too near, just enough. "My life's already messy. But this is simple. You needed help. I gave it." She wanted to believe him. But part of her still felt like she was borrowing time. Like any second, the real world would crash in and take this fragile piece away. Then, one rainy afternoon, much like the night she arrived, the doorbell rang. Not a knock. A ring. Formal. Unexpected. They both froze. He motioned for her to stay back, then went to the security monitor by the door. She watched his face as he looked at the screen. His expression didn't change, but his whole body went still. "Who is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Him." Her blood turned to ice. "Derek?" He nodded. Panic clawed up her throat. "How did he find me?" "I don't know." His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." He walked to a closet, pulled out a small black case, and opened it. She didn't see what was inside, just the way his hand moved with practiced ease. Then he tucked something into the back of his waistband and headed for the front entrance. She wanted to follow. To hide, to scream, but she stayed, pressing herself against the wall, listening. The door opened. "What do you want?" the man asked, voice flat. "I'm looking for someone," came a voice she knew too well. Rough, smug, laced with false charm. "My girl. She's got a habit of running off. Thought she might have come here." She didn't. "Mind if I take a look?" "You do." A pause. Rain pattered on the roof. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Derek said, chuckling. "I'm the guy who doesn't take no for an answer." "I know exactly who you are," the man replied, voice colder now. "And I'm telling you, walk away now." There was a scuffle, quick, brutal. A grunt. Then silence. She peeked around the corner just in time to see Derek stumble backward, clutching his jaw, eyes wide with shock. The man stood in the doorway, unmoved, like he'd just swatted a fly. "You come near this place again," he said, "and you won't walk away." Derek spat blood on the ground, glaring. "This isn't over." "It is," the man said. "For you." Derek backed off, muttering curses, and disappeared into the rain. The door closed. Locked. Bolted. She stood there, trembling, tears finally spilling over. He turned and saw her. Didn't say a word. Just walked over, grabbed a clean towel from the shelf, and handed it to her. She took it, wiping her face. "He's not coming back," he said. "How do you know?" "Because men like him only push until they meet someone who won't bend. And I don't bend." She believed him. Not because he was scary, though he clearly was, but because he meant it. There was no bluff in his voice. Just fact. That night she slept through the whole night for the first time in years. In the morning, she found him outside, smoking a cigarette under the awning, watching the sky clear. She stood beside him. "Not too close, thank you," she said. He exhaled slowly. "You don't have to thank me. I do. You didn't have to protect me." He looked at her then, really looked. Maybe I needed to protect someone. She didn't ask what he meant. But she thought about the photo on the wall, the woman with the kind eyes. Maybe he'd lost someone he couldn't save. Maybe this was his way of making it right, even if it wasn't with her. Whatever the reason, she was grateful. Days turned into 2 weeks. She started sleeping with the lights off. Started humming while she cooked. Started believing just a little that she might be safe, and he started leaving the office door open. Started asking her opinion on small things. Too much salt? Or which route's faster? Little threads of normalcy, woven between two people who'd both been broken in different ways. She still didn't know his name. And he still didn't know hers. But names didn't matter as much as actions. And in that quiet warehouse, far from the noise of the city, they were building something rare. Trust, one silent morning at a time. The peace didn't last. It never does. It started with a car. Not just any car. Black, low-slung with tinted windows and a quiet engine that purred like it had secrets. It circled the block 3 times one afternoon while she was hanging laundry on the line strung between 2 metal posts behind the warehouse. She didn't think much of it at first. Delivery drivers got lost. Tourists took wrong turns. But the 3rd time it passed, slow and deliberate, she felt that old familiar prickle on the back of her neck, the one that meant danger was near. She went inside and told him. He didn't panic. Didn't even frown. Just walked to the window, pulled the curtain back a sliver, and watched. After a minute, he let it fall. "Not police," he said. "Too clean. Too careful. Then who? Someone watching. Maybe testing." She hugged her arms. "Because of me?" He didn't answer right away. "Then maybe. Or maybe because I've been distracted." She knew what he meant. Ever since she'd shown up, he'd canceled meetings, turned down deals, kept his people on a tighter leash. In his world, that looked like weakness, and weakness invited trouble. That night, he changed the locks, added a second deadbolt, set up a motion sensor light in the alley. Small things, but they spoke louder than words. "I'm not taking chances." A few days later, a package arrived. No return address. Just her name, written in handwriting she recognized instantly, scrawled across the front in thick black marker. Her stomach dropped. He saw her face and took the box before she could touch it. "Don't," he said gently. "Let me." He carried it outside, placed it on the concrete pad behind the garage, and stepped back. Waited. Nothing happened. Then carefully he opened it. Inside was a single red rose, wilted, and a note. "You can't hide forever." She didn't need to read it to know who sent it. The scent alone, the cheap cologne he always wore, clung to the paper like a ghost. "He's getting closer," she whispered. "He's trying to scare you," the man said, folding the note and tucking it into his pocket. Don't let him. But fear had already taken root. She jumped at every sound. Checked the locks twice before bed. Stopped going near the windows after dark, he noticed. Of course he did. One evening, as they ate a quiet dinner of rice and grilled vegetables, he set his fork down. "You're not sleeping again?" She stirred her food. "I keep thinking, what if he finds a way in? What if he waits until you're gone? He won't get that chance. How can you be sure?" He looked at her, steady. "Because I've dealt with men like him before. They talk big, but they break easy." She wanted to believe that. But Derek wasn't just loud or angry, he was patient. He'd waited weeks once just to prove he could find her after she'd moved. He'd show up with flowers and apologies, then twist everything back into control. That was his game, and now he knew where she was. The next morning, she found tire tracks in the gravel near the side gate. Fresh, deep, like someone had parked there for a while. No footprints, just the marks of someone watching, waiting, she told him. He said nothing, just walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking cameras, testing the fence. Later that day, 2 of his men arrived, different from the usual ones. Older, calmer. They didn't speak much, just nodded at her and took positions near the garage entrance. One carried a toolbox, the other, a duffel bag that looked heavy. She didn't ask what was inside. She didn't need to. That night, the man sat at the table cleaning something small and metallic with a cloth. Not a gun, she'd seen those before. This was smaller. A knife, maybe. Or a tool. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. He didn't look up. Doing what? Putting yourself in the middle of my mess. He paused. Set the object down. It's not your mess. It's his. And he crossed a line when he came here. But you don't even know me. I know enough. She stared at her hands. What if he tells people? What if he goes to the police and says you're hiding me? Or worse, says I'm involved in whatever it is you do? He finally looked at her. Let him try. There was something in his voice, quiet, absolute, that made her believe him. But she also saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept flicking to the door. He was ready for a fight, and that scared her more than Derek ever had. 2 nights later, it happened. She was reading by the dim lamp in the corner, some old novel she'd found on a shelf, when she heard it. A soft click near the back gate. Not the wind. Not an animal. Too precise. She froze, then footsteps, slow, deliberate. She didn't call out. Didn't move. Just slipped off the couch and crept to the hallway where she knew he kept a spare phone. But before she could reach it, the front door burst open. Not kicked in, unlocked. He must have picked it, or had a key made. Derek stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, eyes wild, a flashlight in one hand and something metal in the other. A wrench. She recognized it. It was from his old toolbox, the one he used to fix bikes. There you are, he said, voice thick with triumph. Thought you could vanish? You belong with me. She backed up, heart hammering. Get out. Or what? You gonna call your new boyfriend? He laughed, stepping inside. Nice place, real cozy. Too bad he's not here to protect you. She glanced toward the office. The door was closed. Was he even home? Derek followed her gaze. Don't worry. I made sure he wouldn't interrupt. Her blood ran cold. What did you do? Just a little surprise for his car. Won't be driving anywhere tonight? She didn't believe him, but she couldn't take the chance. Derek took another step. Come on. Let's go home. I don't have a home with you, she said, voice shaking but clear. I never did, his smile vanished. You don't get to decide that. He lunged. She dodged, grabbing the nearest thing, a heavy ceramic mug from the table, and hurled it at him. It hit his shoulder, shattered on the floor. He barely flinched. You always were a fighter, he sneered. But you always lose. He reached for her arm. Then, silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence of someone stopping dead. Derek froze, eyes wide, breath catching. Behind him, in the shadows of the hallway, stood the man. No shirt, barefoot, but his posture was like stone. And in his hand, something long, dark, quiet. Derek turned slowly, face pale. You, he whispered. You shouldn't be here, the man said, voice low, calm. I told you that. Derek's grip on the wrench tightened. This is between me and her. Stay out of it. It's between you and me now. Derek laughed, but it was nervous. You think you scare me? I've seen guys like you. All talk. The man didn't move. Didn't blink. Then you haven't seen enough. For a long moment, no one moved. Rain tapped on the roof. Glass crunched under Derek's shoe. Then Derek swung the wrench. It never landed. The man moved faster than she thought possible. Sidestepped, grabbed Derek's wrist, twisted. There was a sharp cry, the wrench clattering to the floor. In seconds, Derek was on his knees, arm wrenched behind his back, face pressed into the concrete. He grunted, struggling. Let me go. The man leaned down, voice barely above a whisper. Listen carefully. You leave this city tonight. You don't call her. You don't look for her. You don't even say her name out loud. If I hear you're within 100 miles of her, you disappear. Not go to jail, not get hurt. Disappear, understand? Derek's bravado cracked. You can't do that. I already have, he released him with a shove. Derek scrambled back, clutching his arm, eyes darting between them like a trapped animal. "You're crazy," he spat. "Both of you. Go," the man said. "Now." Derek stumbled to his feet, grabbed the wrench, and bolted out the door into the rain. The man didn't follow. Just stood there, breathing slowly, hands loose at his sides. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, not from fear now, but from the sheer, overwhelming relief of being safe again. After a long moment, he turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded, unable to speak. He walked over, picked up the broken mug, and tossed it in the trash. Then he locked the door, double-checked the bolt, and turned off the lights. "Get some sleep," he said. "He won't be back." But she knew better than to believe that completely. Men like Derek didn't quit. They just waited for the right moment. Still, something had changed tonight. Not just with Derek, but with her. For the first time, she hadn't just run, she'd stood her ground. She'd fought back. And she hadn't been alone. The next morning, she found him outside, examining his car. The tires were slashed. Oil pooled beneath the engine. Someone had worked fast and quiet. He saw her watching. "He's desperate. He's dangerous." He was dangerous, he corrected. Now he's just scared. She wasn't so sure. But she also saw something new in his eyes, not just control, but resolve. Like he'd made a decision. Later that day, he made a call. Not loud, not angry, just firm. Get him on a bus one way out of state. Make sure he boards. And if he steps off before the final stop, handle it. She didn't ask what handle it meant. She didn't want to know. But that night, as they sat at the table sharing a simple meal of soup and bread, she finally asked the question that had been burning inside her. "Why risk it? For me?" He stirred his soup. "Because no one should live like that. But you're not exactly a hero." He almost smiled. "No, but I know the difference between right and wrong." "And what he did to you? That's wrong." She looked down. "I used to think I deserved it." "You never did." She nodded, tears welling again, but this time, they were quiet, cleansing. Outside, the city hummed on, unaware of the small war that had just been fought in a hidden warehouse. Unaware that a woman had finally stopped running. Unaware that a man who dealt in shadows had chosen just this once to stand in the light for someone else. But peace is fragile, and in his world, consequences always come due. 2 days later, a different kind of visitor arrived, not Derek, not a thug. A man in a plain suit, no badge, but with that calm, watchful look of someone used to asking questions and getting answers. He parked a sedan across the street and sat there for an hour, just watching. When she pointed him out, the man's expression darkened. "Police?" she asked. "Worse," he said. "Internal affairs. Or private investigator. Either way, they're connecting dots. Because of me. Because of everything." She felt sick. "I should leave. Before I drag you down with me." He turned to her, eyes sharp. "You're not dragging me anywhere." This was coming anyway. But no, he said, firmer this time. "You stay. You're safe here, and I'll deal with whatever comes." She wanted to argue, but she saw the truth in his face. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about choices, about lines drawn in the sand. That night he sat at the table late into the evening, papers spread out, phone silent. She brought him coffee. He didn't thank her, just nodded. But his hand brushed hers for a second, and that small touch said more than words ever could. She went to bed knowing the storm wasn't over. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was weathering it alone. And sometimes, that's enough to keep going. The knock came on a Tuesday morning, sharp, official, the kind that doesn't ask, just demands. She was washing dishes when she heard it. The sound alone made her stomach drop. Not the soft tap of a neighbor, not the hesitant rap of a delivery person. This was firm, confident, like the person on the other side already knew what they'd find inside. She turned off the faucet, water dripping from her fingers. Looked toward the hallway. He was already at the door, standing just to the side, out of view from the peephole. He gave her a single look. "Stay back," and opened it just enough to speak through the chain. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice neutral. "Detective Ruiz," came the reply. "I'd like to ask a few questions." She couldn't see him, but she knew the type. Calm, polite. The kind who wore patience like armor. He didn't invite the detective in. Just stood there, blocking the view. "About? About a woman who may be staying here. We've had reports concerning her safety." Her breath caught. "Reports? From who? Derek?" A neighbor? Someone watching the warehouse? She stayed quiet, pressing herself against the kitchen wall, heart pounding. A woman? The man said, tone flat. I live alone. There was a pause. Then, we have reason to believe she sought shelter here recently, after an incident with her ex-partner. She didn't. You're certain? I don't take in strangers. Another silence. She could almost hear the detective weighing his words, deciding whether to push. We're not here to cause trouble, he said finally. Just want to make sure she's safe. If you see her, tell her to come forward. No charges, just help. I'll keep that in mind. The door closed. The lock clicked. The chain slid back into place. She waited until she heard the car start and drive away before she moved. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, jaw tight. They're watching, she whispered. They've been watching, he corrected, but they don't have proof. What if they come back with a warrant? Then we deal with it. He looked at her. But you need to decide something. What? Do you trust me? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Then trust this. If you tell them I'm hiding you, they'll dig into my life. And what they find, it won't end well for either of us. She knew what he meant. He wasn't a criminal in the way movies show, no flashy drugs or shootouts. But his world ran on favors, silence, and things that never made the news. And once the police started looking, they wouldn't stop at her story. They'd tear his whole operation apart, and people would get hurt. I won't say anything, she said firmly. He nodded, but his eyes were heavy. It's not that simple. They'll ask you directly. And lying to a detective? That's a crime. I don't care. You should. She stepped closer. You kept me safe when no one else would. The least I can do is protect you now. He studied her for a long moment. Then quietly, you're not the same person who knocked on my window that night. No, she admitted. I'm not. Something shifted between them then. Not romance, not even friendship exactly. More like two people who'd seen each other's cracks and chosen not to look away. Over the next few days, the detective didn't return. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. A car idled at the end of the street longer than usual. A man in a windbreaker took photos of the warehouse with his phone. Even the mail felt different, like someone had opened it before it arrived. She started noticing things she hadn't before. The way he checked his rearview mirror 3 times on every drive, how he never used the same route twice, the coded language he used on calls, the shipments delayed, the client changed his mind, that she now understood meant something else entirely. And yet, he never shut her out. If anything, he let her in more. One evening, while fixing a loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet, he asked, Ever handled a ledger? She shook her head. Good, he said. Means you're honest. She laughed. A real laugh, the first in weeks. What's that supposed to mean? People who've cooked books always think they're smarter than the paper. She watched him work, the quiet focus in his hands. You're not what I expected. And you're not what I expected either. She smiled. Guess we're full of surprises, but the calm couldn't last. 3 nights later, the power went out. Not just the warehouse, the whole block. Too sudden for a storm. Too precise. He was on his feet instantly, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer. Stay behind me. She followed as he moved through the dark, checking windows, doors, the garage. Everything was locked. But when he stepped outside to inspect the fuse box, he stopped short. Don't come out, he said. She stayed in the doorway, peering into the black. He knelt by the box, then cursed under his breath. What is it? Cut wires, clean, professional. Someone had done this on purpose. He went back inside, locked the door, and pulled out a battery-powered radio. Static. Then a voice. Possible gas leak reported in the industrial district. Residents advised to avoid the area until further notice. She looked at him. Gas leak? No gas lines out here. It was a cover. A distraction. Why would they do that? She asked. To get us out, or to get us alone. She wrapped her arms around herself. What do? We wait. And we watch. They spent the night in the back room, lights off, curtains drawn, sitting in silence. She dozed off once, head resting against the wall, only to wake to the sound of his voice on a low, urgent call. No, he was saying. Not here. They're testing me. Tell Leo to hold position. And get eyes on the detective, find out who's really pulling his strings. She pretended to sleep. But her mind raced. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. This was bigger. Someone wanted him weakened, and she was the weak spot they were using to get to him. The next morning, power returned. The gas leak was declared a false alarm. Life went back to normal on the surface. But beneath it, everything had changed. He started carrying a small bag with him whenever he left. She didn't ask what was inside. She didn't need to, and she started paying attention. When the detective came back, this time with a female officer, softer voice, kinder eyes, she was ready. They found her at the bus stop 2 blocks away. Like she'd been trying to leave on her own. She hadn't. He'd driven her there and waited out of sight. "Just want to make sure you're okay," the woman said gently. "We're worried about you." "I'm fine," she replied, voice steady. "I left my ex weeks ago. Haven't seen him since. Are you staying with someone?" She hesitated, just enough to seem honest. "I couch surfed for a bit. Now I'm on my own. You sure? Because we got a tip you were seen getting into a black SUV the night you disappeared." Her pulse jumped, but she kept her face calm. "Lots of black SUVs in this city." The detective studied her. "You know it's not a crime to ask for help. But lying to us, that makes things harder." "I'm not lying," she said, meeting her eyes. "I just want to be left alone." They let her go. But as she walked away, she felt their gaze on her back like a weight. Back at the warehouse, he was waiting. "Well?" he asked. "I stuck to the story." He nodded. "Good." But she could see the worry in his eyes. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," he admitted. "But they also don't know everything." "What do you mean?" He sat at the table, rubbed his temples. "Derek didn't act alone. Someone pointed him here. Someone who knew I'd taken you in." "Who?" He looked at her. "Someone inside my circle." She felt a chill. "One of your men? Or someone they talked to?" He sighed. "Loyalty's expensive, and lately I've been spending it on you." She didn't take offense. It was the truth. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." He leaned forward. "But I need to know, do you want out? I can get you to a shelter in another state, new name, fresh start. Today." She thought about it. Safety. Distance. A life where no one knew her past. But then she thought about the nights she'd slept without nightmares. The mornings she'd woken up and felt like a person, not a victim. The quiet strength in the way he'd stood between her and danger, not because he had to, but because he chose to. "No," she said. "I stay." He looked surprised. "Even with all this?" "Especially with all this." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. That night he made a different kind of call. Not to his men. To a lawyer. To a banker. To someone who handled transitions. She overheard pieces. Start the paperwork. Clean assets. New structure. Legitimate front. She didn't ask. But the next day he brought home a stack of folders. Business licenses, lease agreements, training manuals. "What's all that?" She asked. "A new beginning," he said. "For both of us." She didn't understand at first. But over the next week it became clear. He was walking away. From the shadows, the deals, the unspoken rules. Not all at once, but step by step. He sold off parts of his operation. Cut ties with the riskiest partners. Started building something real. A private security firm. Small, local, legal. And when he asked her to help, "You're good with people. You notice things. I need someone who can talk to clients, listen to what they're really saying." She didn't say no. Because for the first time, she saw a future that wasn't just about surviving, it was about living. And maybe, just maybe, helping others find their way out of the dark, like someone had done for her. 6 months later, the city felt different, not because it had changed, but because she had. She stood in a sunlit office on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown, far from the damp alleys and flickering streetlights of the past. The space was small but clean. 2 desks, a filing cabinet, a potted fern in the corner that she watered every Monday, and a window that looked out over rooftops and treetops and, in the distance, the slow curve of the river. On the door, a simple sign read, R&K Security Solutions Client Services. No flashy logo. No armed guards in the lobby. Just a quiet promise. We listen. We protect. She adjusted the collar of her blouse, navy blue, crisp, bought with her first paycheck, and glanced at the clock. 10 minutes until her next appointment. A woman, referred by a domestic violence shelter, needed help installing security cameras in her new apartment. She'd been through something similar. She'd understand. The phone rang. She answered on the second ring. R&K Security, how can I help you? Her voice was calm now, steady. Not the shaky whisper it used to be. As she took down the caller's details, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass of the framed license on the wall. State certified, background checked, fully legal. She almost didn't recognize the person looking back. Hair longer, shoulders straighter, eyes that didn't dart to the door every time it opened. When she hung up, she walked to the kitchenette and poured 2 cups of coffee. He'd be here soon. He still didn't wear suits like before. Now it was dark jeans, button-down shirts, boots that were scuffed but clean. He came in through the back entrance, old habits died hard, and nodded when he saw her. Morning, he said, taking the coffee. Morning. Got a call from the shelter. They're sending someone over at 11. He sipped his coffee, eyes scanning the street below. Good. They didn't talk much before clients. Silence had become their language, comfortable, not empty. After the appointment, the woman left with a folder of instructions, a list of emergency contacts, and a small keychain alarm that beeped loudly when pressed. She hugged her before leaving. Thank you, she whispered. I feel like I can breathe now, she nodded. You will. One day at a time. When the door closed, he was standing by the window again. You're good at this, he said quietly. I just tell them what I wish someone had told me. He turned, leaning against the sill. You ever think about how it all started? Every day, that rainy night. The knock on the car window. The desperate plea, can I hide in your car? She'd had no idea who he was, only that he was her only chance. And he, with all his secrets and shadows, had said yes. Now they ran a business built on that same idea, giving people a place to be safe, even if just for a little while. It hadn't been easy. The first few months were tense. Police inquiries slowed but didn't stop. Old associates showed up, confused or angry, demanding answers. One night, a brick came through the office window with a note, traitor. But he handled it calmly, permanently, no violence. Just boundaries drawn in ink and law, not blood, and she learned to trust not just him but herself. To speak up, to set limits, to believe she deserved peace. One afternoon, while sorting mail, she found a letter with no return address. Her hands froze. But it wasn't from Derek, it was from the detective. Inside, a single line. Glad you're safe. We're closing the file. She showed it to him. He read it, folded it, and tossed it in the shredder without a word. Some ghosts, it turned out, could be laid to rest. Business grew slowly. They took only clients they believed in, mostly women, mostly fleeing something they couldn't outrun alone. He handled the technical side, alarms, cameras, safe room designs. She handled the human side, listening, planning, walking them through their fear until it felt manageable. They never talked about the past. Not really. But sometimes, late at night, when the office was quiet and the city lights blinked like stars, he'd say something that hinted at it. People think strength is about power, he said once, wiping down a camera lens. But real strength is knowing when to stop. She knew he meant his old life. The one he'd walked away from, not because he was weak, but because he'd finally chosen something better. And she'd chosen to stay. Not out of fear, not out of debt, but because this quiet work, this helping, felt like purpose. One Friday, as they locked up the office, she asked, "Do you ever miss it?" He paused, keys in hand. The old life? She nodded. He looked out at the street where kids were walking home from school and a street vendor was packing up his cart. I miss the control, he admitted. But not the cost. What cost? The people you hurt without meaning to. The lines you cross until you forget where they were. She understood. She'd crossed lines too, lying to police, hiding in shadows, trusting a man the world would call dangerous. But sometimes the right thing doesn't look right on paper. They walked to the parking garage in comfortable silence. His car was different now, silver sedan, nothing flashy, reliable, legal. Before getting in, he turned to her. You know, you could have left, started over somewhere else. No ties, no risk, she smiled. And miss all this paperwork? He almost laughed. Almost, I mean it, he said. You didn't owe me anything. I know, she said softly. But you gave me a chance when I had none. The least I could do was help you build something worth keeping. He held her gaze for a long moment. then nodded like that was answer enough. Driving home, she watched the city blur past. The same streets that once felt like a cage now felt like a map of all she'd survived. She didn't live in the warehouse anymore. She had her own apartment now, 3 blocks from the office, with real curtains and a fire escape she could sit on at night. Safe. Quiet. Hers. And he still lived alone. But the warehouse was empty now, sold, cleaned out, turned into artist studios. He'd kept only one thing, the old photo of him and his sister. It sat on his desk at the office now, next to a small framed certificate from the state licensing board. Sometimes, when a new client came in shaking, eyes wide with fear, she'd catch him watching them the way he must have watched his sister, years ago, helpless, too late, but now, he wasn't too late, and neither was she. One evening, after a long day, they sat on the office rooftop, the one place he'd insisted on when they signed the lease. Need somewhere to think, he'd said. Now it was their quiet ritual. 2 chairs, a thermos of tea, and the city spread out below like a living thing. She sipped her tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and purples. You ever think about what comes next? She asked. He leaned back. I used to think next meant more power, more control. Now I think it just means more days like this, she smiled. Me too. They didn't need grand plans. Just this, a job that mattered, a roof that didn't leak, and the quiet knowledge that they'd both found a way out of the dark, not by running, but by standing together. Later, as she walked to her apartment, she passed a woman standing near a bus stop, hugging a thin jacket around herself, eyes scanning the street like she was looking for an exit. Their eyes met for just a second. The woman looked away quickly, but she didn't walk on. She stopped. Hey, she said gently. You okay? The woman hesitated, then voice barely above a whisper, I don't know where to go. She didn't offer a car, didn't promise miracles, just pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it over. If you need help, she said, call us. We don't judge. We just listen. The woman took the card like it was something precious, and as she walked away, she felt it again, that quiet hum of hope, the same one she'd felt that rainy night when a stranger said yes. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bad days, still moments when a loud noise made her flinch, or when she double-checked the locks 3 times. But now she knew how to breathe through it, and she knew she wasn't alone. Back in her apartment, she hung her coat, watered her plants, and turned on the lamp by the window. Outside, the city hummed on, full of danger, yes, but also full of chances. And somewhere out there, another person was asking, can I hide? Thanks to 2 people who chose kindness over fear, the answer could still be yes.